Welcome into Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Polillo and Josh Jordan. You can read their work on sportsmap.com and follow them on X at Polillo and at Josh Jordan 975. On today's episode, 4 Texans make the Pro Bowl, but one notable snub. The Texans gear up for possible revenge on the culture-thieving Titans, and we'll get into some possible first-round matchups for Houston. Before we do get into all that, please click like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, click the bell for notifications so you know when new content drops, like when we go live after all the games, which we will be doing during the playoffs as well. We'll get into this week's matchup in just a bit, guys, but news broke before we hit record that 4 Texans have been selected for the Pro Bowl. Nico Collins, Joe Mixon, Larry Tunsil, and Derek Stingley. Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. are named alternates, but how surprised are you to see that Hunter, who has been a beast on defense this year, gets the snub?
Yeah, he's the question. I always like to put the qualifier that it's a finite number of spots. So it's only a snub if a player is omitted for a clearly inferior player. The case for Hunter is outstanding. Max Crosby of the Las Vegas Raiders, we're looking at you as the iffy guy. Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, unassailable choices. Now, Crosby on a crappy defense without a bookend stud pass rusher. So you go by individual stats, sometimes can be deceiving. But Hunter has been excellent, basically from the opening bell through the season. So I would have had him on there. I don't think it's a high crime as Pro Bowl selections go. The high crime would be if they still played a Pro Bowl. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with that. Will Anderson did not have a good case, and here's why. He doesn't play enough. I don't mean missing games injured, but Will Anderson sits out series and parts of series, which is okay. His foremost strength is as a pass rusher. But Will Anderson has played just under 55% of the Texans' defensive snaps this season. And it's not like he's missed 4 games. Danielle Hunter, close to 75%. Ditto, Crosby, Garrett, Henderson. So anyone who wants to squawk about Hunter not making it, have at it. Will Anderson does not belong on this year's Pro Bowl roster.
Yeah, I think this might have been a case here where they kind of canceled each other out a little bit, Anderson and Hunter, and maybe that's why Danielle didn't get in there. I'm disappointed for him. I think he has had a terrific year filling in for Gernard, and Gernard's had a really nice year in Minnesota. That kind of swap of those guys in Cashman, and it's kind of worked out pretty well for both teams there. But yeah, I'm disappointed for Danielle, but it is the Pro Bowl. It's not the end of the world. Everybody knows what type of player he is. And, you know, I know the Raiders aren't exactly must-see TV, but the Texans have been kind of out of sight, out of mind for kind of the back half of the season, playing in a really poor division and basically losing every national TV game and often in an embarrassing fashion. So I'm not surprised a lot of Texans aren't at the top of the list for Pro Bowls.
For Houston's Week 18 matchup, the results are like this doesn't really matter except for draft slotting for Tennessee and Houston being as healthy as possible for the playoffs. And there's always the old pride factor with the rivalry between the two ownership groups here. But on the field, on the offensive side for Houston, there's no real incentive for CJ Stroud to play meaningful minutes. The line has been challenged to protect him all season. He's got the wear and tear to show for it. And Houston has, quite frankly, bigger fish to fry than putting a 3-win team in their place. What do you think we'll see from Houston's offense this week?
I think D'Amico Ryans ultimately is going to go, we want to play good football. We want to wash the taste of Baltimore humiliating us out of our minds or out of our hair. Probably won't put it that way. I say phooey to that. A strong showing, even a partial game for your meaningful guys against a 3-13 team. Is that going to make you feel good about yourselves and you're going to be all ramped up for the playoffs? I just think Sunday is devoid of meaning. Now, with a 53-man roster, you can't sit everybody and play your red shirts and your walk-ons. But Stroud, Mixon, and Collins, who've each missed chunks of the season to injury. Will Anderson, who's had the ankle issue ongoing. Danielle Hunter. Derek Stingley, part of his excellence. Perfect attendance, right? After missing a whole bunch of games his rookie year and last year. So if you want to trot him out for a play or two so he can say, I played in all 17 games. Mixon is 7 yards shy of 1,000 yards. I'm guessing they'll want to get him that. But big deal, 1,000 yards in a 17-game season is 59 yards per game. Doesn't mean what it used to, but with the 3 games missed, Mixon's been 1,000-yard quality back. He got the Pro Bowl nod. Don't play him. Let him finish with a third consecutive season without a fumble. To me, the Texans could look like world beaters in this game. They'd be beating a Scribini. So I see no tip the scale incentive to playing my best and most important guys.
Yeah, if the offense hadn't been so poor for most of the season, I think they probably would be considering letting some guys rest. But especially coming off a 31-2 showing against the Ravens, do you want that to be the last taste in your mouth for the offense? Me personally, I would rest the guys. But it sounds like D'Amico is going to let these guys play a little bit, treat it kind of like a preseason game, see how the game flow takes them. But to me, it's not worth the risk. If we've seen Mixon get his ankle rolled over on, or the hip drop tackles on him, that would be the worst thing if something like that happened to him in the last game of the season. And he's kind of been fighting through that ankle anyway. So he's a guy I don't want to see a lot of. Now, Deontay Johnson, I do want to see. I'd like to see what he can produce. He's a guy that can get open, and that's been one of the biggest problems over the last few weeks. Is outside of Nico Collins, nobody else is getting open with Tank injured, and it's just not working with Hutchinson and Mechie. For whatever reason, they haven't really broken out. I think speed's a big part of it, quickness. Deontay Johnson's one of those guys that can really separate. Maybe get him some reps here. Maybe they can get in the flow a little bit with CJ, but I don't want to see much of that. We know from CJ that he's been playing through something. We're not exactly sure what it is, but with him being the ball placement expert last year, we saw how terrific that was, and that just has not been the case this year. I kind of hope there is some kind of short-term injury thing that's causing that. We see CJ bounce back and be that accurate again. So Deontay Johnson's a guy that can help him, but in my opinion, I'd rather see Davis Mills throw into him, get him going in the offense. And of course, all the guys that are banged up and not in practice, they should not be playing this week. Those guys need to get ready for next week.
I'll piggyback on Deontay Johnson. If you're going to play Stroud at all, max protect, run the route tree with Deontay Johnson, 7-8 plays, all of them going to Deontay Johnson. This one you run it out. This one you run a slant. This one you run a drag. This one you go deep. Okay, that's it. CJ, get the hell off the field.
It stands to reason it would be harder for the receiving corps to get open, Josh, considering how much success teams have had rushing just 4 and 5 rushers at CJ. So you can stay back in coverage and, double team some guys and just run zone. That'd be more successful. On the defensive side for Houston, the injury report isn't great. It's hard to think D'Amico, again, won't use this opportunity this week to get some guys some necessary rest to heal up for the playoffs. What do you think Houston's defense will look like, and what are some matchups that could help tilt the game in Houston's favor?
Well, it means 0 for this game because this game means 0 in terms of its results. But Azeez Al-Shire comes off suspension, so I'm sure they'll want to get him some game reps. How much game conditioning you're going to build up playing partial time against the Titans. But to get him back on the field ahead of the playoff game, to me, that's the chief defensive angle for the Texans going in. In terms of the matchups, Will Levis, Mason Rudolph, the Titans can play 2 quarterbacks at the same time, and they're not very good. Pollard's a decent running back. He actually had a case for the Pro Bowl. More yards per carry than Joe Mixon, actually. But geez, this is just a snoozer. It's endure this game and nobody get hurt. That's the defensive strategy if I'm the Texans.
Absolutely. You look at Kamari Lassiter, you could think like in theory, like, oh, well, maybe because he's having to kind of play a different role with Jimmy Ward injured, maybe he could use some more reps, but he's banged up right now with a quad. I don't want him out there. It doesn't make any sense to play him, in my opinion. So it's, Autry, Fadakasi's banged up. So all these guys need to just be getting rested for the big game. I know there's pride on the line, the ownership, they're not real big fans of each other. And of course we're getting the Oilers uniforms this week. I know they turned their X handle to an oil derrick. So, yay, we're going to get to see that. But I mean, the Texans have bigger fish to fry than a meaningless game against the Titans at the end of the year. And I know maybe there's some of that, hey, they beat us and we want to get some payback or whatever, but Texans are a playoff team. That's not stuff they should be worrying about right now. And a playoff team that frankly is limping into the playoffs. They've been getting worse as the season's been going along. So I think it's time to just kind of reset everything and see if you can kind of recapture some of that magic and not do anything stupid to blow that opportunity by getting somebody hurt in this game. And if you go out and you do play your guys and nobody gets hurt, great. But what if they go out there and punt, and it's just more kind of looking like that Ravens game? Like that could be even a bigger problem, to where you're like, man, we're still awful even against the Titans in a meaningless game. And then you take that with you into the playoffs. I just don't see a lot of upside of playing these guys right now.
The Titans are a 3-13 embarrassment. If they want to again play cutesy in your face with the Oilers uniform, that's the best they have to offer right now to their own fans as an organization. The laugh's on them.
Yeah, I outside of the retro unis looking cool, I just don't understand how Titans fans have any real nostalgic connection to the Oilers as a team or a franchise. But there's always the troll factor there. We know the rivalry between the two organizations, so I guess there's that. Before we get into predictions, I do want to get your final X factors or X factors for this game. We're always interested in hearing everyone's X factors as well, so make sure you're letting us know in the comments. Charlie, we start with you. Final X factor for Texans Titans.
Who stays awake for more of the 60 minutes of game action? I mean, the Titans are flirting with top of the draft selection. The result could not be any less meaningful to the Texans. I guess if they win the game, a couple of us nail the 10-7 prediction, Brandon. Is that? So I'll go with it. I need to get a telegram to the Texans. Need to win this one for some of us. That's enough. Because this doesn't impact the Texans' draft position at all. The playoff teams, it's inverse order of when you're, how long you last in the playoffs. So it's just survive and see who shows up here next weekend.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see D'Amico handle this really well as a coach. Like whatever happens, if you want to get the guys work, fine, whatever. But get in and out of this game without a huge mistake happening, to where next week we're on this podcast going, D'Amico, what were you thinking? Why did you You know, D'Amico's hadn't been quite as bulletproof this year with, so a little more questionable decision making. I think the big one is looking at the O-line. Is we're not expecting Shaq Mason to go, and who knows if he's ready to go next week for the playoffs. It appears that Juice Scruggs is going to be back. He was at least a limited participant in practice. So if he's going to be playing right guard for you, and that's a tough defensive front against the Titans. We saw him whip up on the Texans the first time they played, especially their D tackles. So maybe just getting Scruggs some reps over at right guard, a position he hasn't played much this year. Maybe that benefits you. But then again, he's coming off an injury. You don't want him re-injuring that foot in this game.
The odds on this game have been moving since the line opened initially. As it stands right now, as we record this, Texans are 1 to 1.5 point dogs, depending on the book. The point total ranges from 36.5 to 38. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us your score predictions in the comments. Charlie, this week we start with you. Final score, Texans, Titans.
A Paramount import. You guys make sure to text me like 2:45. So I'm awake for the end of it, and when we get together for the post game. Lowest total in the league this week, right?
Yep.
I'll say befitting the value of this game, Texans 10, Titans 7.
Yeah, we might have to text you and wake you up if that's the score, Charlie. I'm going to go 2017 Texans, with it being that super low score, at least the total prediction. I'm hoping the Vegas is expecting a lot of Davis Mills, and personally, I'm hoping for a lot of Davis Mills in this game, not because I like watching it, because I think it's the best decision for the team. So yeah, I think the Texans maybe win by a field goal in 2017.
There you go. I'll do 24-20, but the real win, 24-20 Texans, by the way, but the real win would be for a clean game from an injury standpoint. And as we mentioned, this game won't matter for the Texans for playoff seeding, but from Houston's perspective, Texans will face the number 5 team, which will either be the Steelers or Chargers. So guys, out of those two potential teams, which do you think is the better matchup for Houston in that first round? Josh, we start with you.
Yeah. I'm going to take. Here's what's tough about it, right? I think the Chargers present the bigger challenge, just because I think they're better at quarterback than the Steelers are at this point in Russell Wilson's career. But I also think if it is Pittsburgh, half the stadium's going to be Steelers fans. So that's going to hurt your home field advantage a little bit there. So, but because of quarterback play and some other factors, I think I would rather face the Steelers. We saw CJ whip up on the Steelers last year. So, yeah, I think I'd rather see Pittsburgh.
You summed it up pretty well for me there, Josh. I would have more hope in Russell Wilson coming in here and laying an egg than I would Justin Herbert. That said, with the Steelers, the fan factor would be real. Visions of TJ Watt and Cameron Haywood and Alex Highsmith just wrecking house with the Texans offensive line. Oh boy. Chris Boswell, probably the best kicker in the NFL this year, other than Thunderfoot for the Cowboys. But, on the pass rush front, the Chargers have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. So I will also tepidly lean with the team that I think has the inferior quarterback. Careful what you root for, but I would give the Texans a better chance of beating the Steelers. I think that would be close to a pick'em game. I think the Chargers would come here as a small favorite. And they're just a physical, Jim Harbaugh, rough and tumble team. Not that the Steelers through the years are soft, but the Steelers heading into their game with the Bengals Saturday, they've lost 3 in a row. Momentum can be off the table. You're zip and zip going into the playoffs. But I think I'd rather see the Steelers also.
Charlie woke up and chose violence this morning. Shots fired at my 11-win prediction and then dropping a TJ Yates reference. So Charlie woke up very...
TJ Watt.
Oh, TJ Watt, sorry.
I feel a lot better if it was TJ Yates pass rushing.
Yes, exactly. Probably would. That's going to be it for this episode of Texans on Tap. We hope to see you back here live on YouTube Sunday late afternoon following the game. So make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on. Also, if you're an Astros fan, the three of us host an Astros podcast called Stone Cold Stros on our other YouTube channel, Sports Map Houston. Make sure you're subscribed over there as we'll be continuing to cover free agency for the team. And as for this show, come on back here. Join in on the conversation Sunday after the game. And hopefully we're all celebrating Houston's second consecutive 10-win season. And until then, go Texans.